What if someone had kidnapped Caroline Kennedy, the daughter of JFK? The world would have been in an uproar. The United States would have been. Yet, I was kidnapped in 1941 from Buckingham Palace and brought to Moulton, Alabama, that's near Huntsville, where the NASA began. That was part of my kidnapping, the ransom, etc., that came to keep me alive. I was put here and given the name of a twin, Peggy Ann Dempsey. I married a Childers. My identity stolen. Lina Dempsey had killed her twin. She had them out of wedlock. And she killed Carl, I don't know, a month or so after birth. There was never an autopsy done. And Peggy was killed, the real Peggy. My name is Margaret Ann Windsor. I'm Victoria II, heir to the British Crown. Peggy Dempsey was killed about a week or 2 weeks before I was brought and dropped off there in this pigsty. And by the way, this photo would give you an inaccurate look at this family. They were not dressed like that. They did not have cars. They don't show the shack and the pigsty I lived in. It does show my stomach. I had no food. I had a large stomach develop. Back then, it went away, but I started gaining weight. I get it back. But believe me, it wasn't from eating. I had nothing to eat. So, it was slop. I think they called it slop back then. So I'm going to show, I'm doing this in reference to my being kidnapped. I found out about it in late 1983. And I wrote this down. Usually I do it by memory, but since it's in regard to the Kennedy files that have been released, and you're not going to see this on those files. They're not going to tell about a president that is honored so, and people love him, like JFK and Bobby Kennedy, who have helped take down Great Britain. Remember your friends, the UK and the British, that you talk about with a special relationship? Well, that's me. They kidnapped me. And I wrote this down. I was promised myself I'd go by writing it down. But they're the Mafia. I've been calling them the Illuminati, which is another name for them, the Rockefellers, Rothschilds, Bilderbergers that kidnapped me and took down my father by slandering a beautiful man whose refusal to follow their orders or be a part of them. They went after him with character assassination, and when I was born, there was an addendum to my father's forced abdication, and I'm going to show you pictures in a minute, in 36, December 36. And there was an addendum to it. And by the way, yeah, that's all I'm going to say about that. It was legal, but he was forced to abdicate, and he was married to my mom always, and they were still alive in 1986 when I came to Roanoke in October, the 20th. Now, my dad's married to Claudia Ruth O'Keefe Windsor, and here's Georgia. My aunt, the artist, I can't find a picture of my mom. That's how thorough they've been. They were going to use me as a hostage, and then, they've just about killed me more than one time, believe me. This is my father, Edward VIII, the honorable man that they have so defamed. And this is just one of the doubles that married Wallace Warfield Simpson, your American spy, and became the illegal Duke and Duchess of Windsor. Now, I guess I want to tell this part. I was doing a book in Marietta, Georgia, Cobb County, MD, a license to kill, a 76 till... Larry Flint was shot, okay, March the 6th of 78 in Lawrenceville, Georgia, Gwinnett County, just a few miles, not too many miles from Cobb County, where I lived. It was done in patterns, and I was writing about mind control murders done in patterns and can be proven. And by the way, the Wayne Williams murders that CNN kept updating until not too long ago was a part of this. Mary Welcome, I even talked to her, and she said, "Oh, I do believe you." And it was after then that I was almost killed again. So she never sent her attorney over, and it was taken away from her, and she was no longer his attorney. And Attorney Marcus, I believe, that was retired from the CIA, was the attorney representing Wayne Williams. So he's in state prison in Georgia. But this is a part of it all. There's a list, and it goes back to the Tesla files in 1930 that were stolen, and where you could create an illness or cure it or make it appear of natural cause. And that includes suicide, make somebody commit suicide. This whole thing that they can't make people, that's the biggest lie ever hatched out of hell. They can make people do anything they want them to. They're puppets and programmed. And by the way, the man Paddock in Vegas absolutely was programmed. You shouldn't be autopsying the man's brain. You should autopsy in his body to see if you can find a chip, or better still, just go to the root canal when they've had their teeth done and see if you don't find it there. This is one here. Now, I'm getting on the mind control murders. I'm going back to Kennedy in a minute, this bastard. They'll probably take me off of YouTube for calling him names when look what they've done to me. You admire this woman who has she's used my money and amassed great wealth, and everybody loves her. Look at her. She's holding her little plant, her flower. She's got a hat and clothes on that I paid for. She has, look at all she's done. This family here, that's a bunch of freeloaders and criminals. And I hope there's God, because I hope he puts them all where they belong instead of being honored along with the Kennedys and Bobby Kennedy. By the way, this man is... Mind control has nothing to do with mental illness, all right? That is the biggest... So where have your psychiatrists and mental health and doctors been in all this? You didn't hear them telling all this, and they have to know. This man Holmes was locked up in a mental hospital and said he was mentally ill. Oh, you can prove this one. You can prove a bunch of them that I tell about because they were done in patterns deliberately. And by the way, I did this book in Marietta, and when Mr. Flint was shot and later flown out to his home during the campaign in '83 to replace a Dr. Congressman, Larry McDonald, Piedmont Hospital, when the plane he was on, passenger plane, supposedly he was on it, went down August the 31st of '83, I was flown out to Mr. Flint. It's the first time I had met him. But that was done in patterns. So these can be proven. But to declare these people mentally ill and try to find something, autopsy their brain, for God's sake, Paddock, look what you've done to this man. He's hated. He's a victim himself. This man was given psychotic drugs for an illness he never had. How sick can you get to torture the man and take his life and put people on death row? But you know what? The people I meet here, really, that I've told about my kidnapping, first of all, they don't like to be told about my kidnapping, about who my father is, and that I don't salute their flag. I am George O'Keeffe's, my aunt. The embassy in England are the ones that told me, have been there and saved my life, and Germans and some Americans. So there's no doubt to who I am. I'm Victoria II, heir to the British crown the day I was born. The day I was born, and thus they kidnapped me. Now, here's Caroline. Now, I'm going to tell you something, and I'm getting off, and I meant to read that so that, well, anyway. When I came to Roanoke in '86, I had no money. I came in the winter. I ended up later, about a year or so later, going up on the Appalachian Trail in Troutville, Virginia, near Roanoke, a few miles from Roanoke. I actually went up there, which is cold as it. You wouldn't believe it was a hiker's shack, and cold that it would. You set a gallon jug of water down, and it would be frozen almost. You know, I don't want to put the wrong thing down here. Somebody accuse me of lying, but it would be frozen almost immediately. I mean, it was cold, and I didn't have the equipment or anything. But I went up there to stay off the side of the friggin' road and getting raped and tortured and begging for. They made a pauper out of me. Now, I'm going to stop and not go into the rest of what happened there. I'm just going to tell you that the spring, it was either the first year or second year that I went up on to Full Heart Knob there. I went up there and did the trail too in the summer. But to live, to have a place to go, as cold as it was, I thought I'd die. But it was about, 192. It was either the spring of 93 or 94 that I was up there. It was just prior to building the new, so this would date it, because everybody knows this, the new trail from Mountain Pass near the post office up that side to the hiker shack where I lived. So the old trail and the new trail, you could say Alpha and Omega, right? And all this mess. But I was standing there after spending the winter, so glad it was summer or spring, up the old trail. The new one hadn't been built. It was built the next year, I believe. So that gives you a time date. I'm sure there's somebody that knows or some record of JFK Jr. coming to little old Roanoke, Virginia, and climbing up to the top of the mountain just to tell me I wanted to see how we made you live. And that's exactly what he said. He had a backpack on. I'm standing there at the table. And I thought, my God, that looks like John Kennedy, and his buddy. It was his buddy. It turned out it was the friend that was always with him. Now, John also had George, the magazine, gloating over stealing this from the British, which is me. They installed their own monarch over there, Elizabeth. Illegal treaties were made after I was kidnapped that allowed the United States, the Illuminati, the Mafia, to take over my country and install their own monarch. And kidnap me and all this, the torture that ensued. And my kids, I don't know where they are. They're heirs after me. So I'm paying for all your crimes, and you hate my guts, and you love this woman, and you love JFK. Okay, now I'm going to get in something here. If I'm bouncing around, excuse me. I do want to say this. Mr. Flint did tell that I knew who was responsible for his shooting in Lawrenceville. And I thought this was a kind, I'm not going to read it all, but he did say some things here that I thought was nice, because he did, I'm not either. I mean, I'm not going to go into that again. No need to. I wanted to put this up. Dorothy, let me see. I tried to write here. Now, so I am bouncing around, I guess. It's a little hard to keep it. I got a letter in reference to my book. I thought the things that were happening to me at the time was because of the book. And the FBI came in, I thought, because I had a phone tap. I found out that they had always been, even when I was taken to Huntsville, and I put letters up by Jack Hartsfield, who sadly is deceased about a year and a half ago. He was a reporter FBI agent that saved my life. And I put letters up from him stating that the FBI had a secret, but that they were there in Huntsville, Alabama all along. And I can remember looking back now, but I know a lot of things happened but if the British hadn't been there and the Germans, I think the FBI, as bad as things have been, I think they helped Great Britain in keeping me alive anyway. So I had a letter from William Harper in reference to an FBI investigation. Ongoing investigation, national security involved. Later, in late 83, I began finding out that I had been kidnapped and who my parents are. And Jack Hartsfield was a part, and it's very sad, he was a hero. So now then I've probably gotten it all confused. I did want to say that Dorothy Kilgallen she's on something like What's My Line? She was a journalist who was very famous, and she said that she had the link to the JFK killings, and it was in the bank vault or safety deposit box. And suddenly this woman, who everybody knew back then, suddenly committed suicide, overdose of pills and suicide, and developed schizophrenia, killed herself. This woman was middle-aged. Mind control was used on her. So that did her in, but I wanted to get back to the Kennedys. Oh, the people who love the Kennedys. Well, wonder who was responsible for the Japanese bombing. I know that they did try to help me. They did. I know that, to find me. But I'm not saying that's the reason at all that the United States bombed them. But JFK was part of the whole mess, or his father and him and his brother. They were flying in there, the older son. So where's Obama in all this, you know? Fake news, I think, is what they did against my father, lies to assassinate him. Now, this is going to go off before I get it up, because I've kind of veered from writing it and doing it from memory, and it's been a lot to remember, but you always want to keep your memory right. So what was I going to put down here? I wanted to put this last thing down. This person texted me this morning, and she said to me, "Just checking on your majesty. May Jesus hold and keep you safe. May your story be known to all. May God's wrath be on the people who hurt and ruined a beautiful, phenomenal woman of your royalty. Godspeed." My grandmother, Victoria, would roll over in her grave if she knew what had been done to me by some of her own relations. So I think that's all I was going to say, other than the mafia. The Illuminati is the mafia. I've been saying Illuminati, trilateral. It's plain and simple, the mafia. And when Marilyn Monroe was murdered, she was dating JFK and the brother Bobby. This is not something I just made up. You can go back in history and check it. But Marilyn Monroe was murdered because she was telling too much and all this. And it mentions a lot about the mafia's involvement in her death and JFK. So the mafia is really what I should be labeling this. And they, after I was kidnapped in 1941, they invaded with treaties signed by George VI, and whoever was signing them, Sir Winston Churchill, helped in destroying the Windsor